move on Friday, which I was able to catch a decent chunk of it, but we want to break down what was going on inside of our level. Right, so this is going to be now the majority of where the focus for the rest of this video is going to be. Right, so when I trade, I have a couple of rules. I typically never trade the first 5 minutes. So let's break this down. 9:30 to 9:35, I will never ever trade those first 5 minutes, right? I never trade the first 5 minutes ever. Even if the setup looks A+, I never trade the first 5 minutes. Usually, I don't even like trading the first 15 minutes, right? 9:30 to 9:45, definitely 9:30 to 9:40 is the market basically warming up, right? The information is key, but how you use it is even more important. So let's break this down. So let's actually fast forward, right? So we have the first sort of 10 to 15 minutes over here. So this is now 9:30 all the way to 9:34, 9:30, 9:40, right? So we are focusing on the price actions here, right? Specifically, this is the first 15 minutes. So what we can see here, the first 15 minutes gives us a pretty clear breakout. So that's 9:44. There you go, 9:45, right? So this is where we use order flow, right? So the way I want you to think about order flows like this. In fact, let me quickly get out my let's quickly get out the image. So if I go to here, if I go to signature system. So how are we looking to read order flow, right? This is how it works. So we want to understand the bid and ask, right? That's what the R stands for. So READ, this is the 4-step process that we're going to use, right? And so the 4-step process, we want to read the bid and ask, we want to then evaluate the delta, we want to assess aggression, and then we want to detect zeros. And this is the 4-step process we use when it comes to reading price action, specifically reading key levels inside, reading price action inside the key levels. And so this is how we do it. Okay, so let's do this, right? Let's take out our SOP and let's see how we do this. Again, this is what traders use live when they're trading. So if you want to read the market or understand what it's doing, you want to go through these four boxes, right? So recognize the bid and ask. Notice how this spells out READ, read. So you're reading price action. You're not trying to predict it or guess it or try and gamble off it or do anything, use indicators, throw all of that in the bin. All you want to do is read the price action. It's very simple. So the first thing is you want to recognize what the bid and ask actually is, right? It doesn't matter if you've been trading order flow for 10 years. It's very important, or it's very useful in my opinion, for you to actually remind yourself every session of what reading price action means or what it does. So when you recognize the bid and ask, right, what this means is you're reading the numbers here, right? So the left number and the right number, right? What do they represent? The bid is aggressive selling. Don't forget that. The bid is aggressive selling, right? The ask is aggressive buying. So we have aggressive selling versus aggressive buying. Okay, fantastic. So we want to identify where the bid and asks are, or what the bid and ask represents. So what I mean by where is you want to be reading the bid and ask inside of your key level. So a common question I get with traders is they try to look at the delta or the order flow in every single candle. Don't do that. It's a big mistake. When I said that refining your key level is the most important thing, I want you to make sure that you have the right key level and you're only reading order flow inside of that key level. So specifically, you see a screenshot of price in my key level here, and again in the key level over here. So that's what we mean by identify where the bid and ask are. You're using the bid and ask inside of the key level. And so we have a very clean representation of what the bid and ask represents. So for me, if we were to grade this out of 5, it would be 5, right? Now let's move on to evaluating the delta. This is what the E stands for in the READ acronym. So evaluate the delta basically means who is more aggressive, right? So E and A come together. But if we look at delta specifically, right, what does delta represent, right? Delta here represents the difference between the ask and the bid. So in other words, if you have a negative delta, so for example, here we see 37 and 261. So you do 37 minus 261. That's obviously a negative delta. That's a very, negative number. It's about minus 200 something, right? Minus 230, whatever it is. Whereas if you look here, for example, this number here, this is 311 for 229. So if you do 311 minus 229, that's going to be a positive number. Therefore, when you evaluate the delta for specific candles inside of specific levels, you're using the ask and the bid to give you that delta. Delta is very important. Delta is super important because you then want to move on to step 3, which is assessing the aggression. So I just want to make one thing clear. If you are trying to trade a key level and you have no idea who is aggressive, or you don't know where the delta is, then you unfortunately are gambling. Right? I want to try and move you away from a gambling trader to actually being profitable, right? Actually passing prop firms, actually taking out payouts. If you have a personal account, actually making $500 to $1,000 per day, right? Actually replacing your job, right? Actually doing all these things, right? You do not need a complicated system. You need a 4 or 3 or maybe 5-step system. I use a 4-step system myself. In order to make this system work, or to make any system work, you need to have order flow backing it up. This is the most important thing. If you don't have order flow backing up your setups, you are gambling, right? You're literally gambling. You cannot read liquidity through ICT concepts. You're not smart money just by marking out a PD array. Indicators are all lagging. Drawing lines, you're better off drawing a picture than drawing anything on the charts, right? You have to understand what the delta is. You have to understand it. Aggression. And the final thing is you need to understand where the zeros are. This is very important. Inside of your key level here, now specifically here, because this was the main candle that allowed me to pull the trigger. If you're trading a key level, looking for a 0 is probably one of the highest leverage things you can also do as a trader, as well as your key level. Because when you see a 0 on the opposing side, that's what the D stands for, right? So if you look here, for example, D stands for detect 0. And we've gone through the entire real-time reading blueprint. So in the now time frame, in the real time, what am I doing to read price action? Well, I'm looking at a few things. Delta and zeros are the main two that stick out here. And so what we can see here is we can see a lot of negative delta or a lot of red delta. Red delta means there's more aggressive sellers than aggressive buyers. That is what the price action is telling me, right? The price action is telling me that inside of my level here, inside of my level here, here, all these areas, we have zeros. So if you are trading or trying to look for a reversal, you're trying to look for a good trade, and you don't have any idea of where the zeros are, again, I hate to break it to you, you are gambling. Good. So I just want you to kind of think in that frame. Now, once you've gone through that, so we've gone through now the real-time reading recipe or the real-time reading blueprint, okay? Now, the next thing on the SOP is the trap filter or the trap execution framework, right? This works hand in hand with the bolt breakout blueprint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip the trap framework or the proof, and I'm going to kind of combine them together. So if we look at the bolt breakout blueprint, this is essentially